Ravens flock, the flock rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. So I'm telling you now, it's about to go down. The podcast, the flock rundown. Ravens, baby. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
Appreciate you, Ray. What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. The Ravens just finished day 19 of training camp, and we got a lot to get into before we get into the practice stuff because the Ravens released two pretty serious statements this morning. Mark Andrews was involved in a pretty serious accident this morning while traveling to practice. He's all good, so let's lead with that. But the car is totaled from my understanding. It definitely was a pretty substantial car accident, but Mark's all good. Mark didn't practice today, but the Ravens said in their statement that he was already scheduled to have today off. Pretty scary incident, especially when that first statement comes out from the team. The team doesn't usually release a lot of statements unless something serious is going on, and this is obviously super serious, but thank God Mark's all good.
It's feeling good. I would say, you know what I would say about that? I would say wear your seatbelts. You know, Mark wore his seatbelts, and that was an accident that happened. And it was pretty significant, I believe. And he came out of it with nothing at all, not a scrape. So wear your seatbelts, and we're thankful to God for that, for him coming out of that safe, and for God protecting him in that circumstance.
And then the Ravens put out another statement like 10 minutes later saying that Coach D has taken a leave from the team and is in the hospital and is going to miss a significant amount of time. They've already replaced him with George Warhop. Joe D had surgery in the offseason, and I guess there's some complications from that surgery, so he's back in the hospital. So keep praying for Joe D. It's a big loss for the organization as well. Harbaugh spoke on that today.
It's an interesting dilemma for sure. It's definitely not something I've ever been associated with. I would just say, by the grace of God, George Warhop is available. A guy that we've known for many years and respected, who Todd has worked with in the past in Tampa Bay. Other coaches have known him and worked with him that are on our staff. He doesn't know our system per se in terms of our terminology, but he can learn that very quickly. But he knows our techniques. He knows the style, the way we're running the plays, the principles of the plays. He knows all that stuff. He's an experienced coach and knows that stuff inside and out. So he'll step right in and he'll start working with those guys right away.
First and foremost, just prayers for Coach Joe D and his recovery, and thoughts and prayers are with his family as well. We hope that he can come back and heal up and get back into the organization soon. And but health is most important, like Harbaugh said. You know, it is a big loss for our team, for our offensive line for sure. But I don't want to look at it from that perspective. Let's look at it from a human perspective. He's in the hospital. He's sick right now, so he needs our support. And we're just praying that he gets better, and we'll worry about the offensive line and things like that later. A few of the Orioles players came to Ravens training camp today. We saw Gunner out there, so that was pretty cool to see. Nate Wiggins also was on the field doing a workout, so that probably means that he's pretty close to coming back. Hopefully they still hold him out of the preseason. I'll continue to say that. We don't need to see any more Nate Wiggins, but him coming back to practice and or at least just going through a workout already on the field is a great sign. So expect to see him back soon. He should definitely be ready for week 1. No other new injuries. Russell Gage did come back to practice today, so he was out for the last few practices, but he did return as well. Wasn't the sharpest day for the offense today. It seemed like the defense had their way. Ryan Mink described the practice as a very high-intensity practice since the pads came back on. They didn't have pads yesterday, but the offense just wasn't clicking on all cylinders today. They had a bunch of pre-snap penalties. These days like this happen. I don't really think there's much to it. It's just a day of practice, you know what I mean? But I want to come on here and talk about it with you guys since we're recapping every single day of practice. But Isaiah Likely stepped up with Mark being out. Not surprised. That seems to happen always, and Likely's been balling all camp anyway. Anthony Miller's really stacking some days. I think he's definitely making an impression. I'm excited to see him in this next preseason game. He seems to really be taking advantage of this opportunity, and he is a vet. I think he's 29 years old, so he's been in the NFL for a good bit, so he probably realizes what kind of opportunity he does have here. He's definitely making an interesting case. I think he's doing really well in practice, so we're just going to need to see that translate over into the preseason games. If he can start making some plays there, I mean, who knows? He's definitely got a shot to make this team. There's no doubt about it. Kyle Hamilton picked off Lamar Jackson today. I guess he tipped the interception to himself. This guy just continues to dominate, continues to make plays. We had that injury scare a few practices ago, but he came right back and is just back to his old self, making plays day after day. Can't say enough good things about Kyle Hamilton. Trenton Simpson almost grabbed an interception today. He was out there flying around. David Ojabo had a strip sack. We were just talking about yesterday how David Ojabo had his best practice and then follows it up today with a strip sack. So watch out for David Ojabo, and especially if he can get cleared by the doctors, then we'll see him in this next preseason game or the following one. Harbaugh said that there's definitely a realistic chance that he does get cleared soon and can play. We'll see. But he's definitely making a lot of plays in camp, so love to hear that. Hopping back over to the offense, the back end of this wide receiver battle is getting pretty interesting. I would say everyone after Aguilar, and then we could throw Tez Walker in there. He's definitely going to make the team. I'd even toss Tylan Wallace in there. So we got our 5 guys. It's going to be Zay, Rashad, Nelson Aguilar, Tylan Wallace, Tez Walker. I think that they're locks, so that's 5 receivers that make the team. But who else is going to make the team? Maybe Hardy is probably a leader in that room right now because he's such an impact on special teams. If he is our returner, if he ends up starting for us in the regular season as kick returner, punt returner, which I think is why he was brought in, also can make some plays occasionally on offense. Are we carrying another one? Is a Russell Gage or Anthony Miller going to make the team? Or are we just going with 6? Is it not Deontay Hardy? He has been in and out a lot. I mean, there's a lot of questions there on that back end. It seems like Anthony Miller right now is stacking the best days, but that's got to continue into the preseason games as well. I think that the games speak volumes, and we didn't get a lot of receiver play. I think Tylan Wallace had a pretty nice day. Dayton Wade made some plays up and down. He also had a lot of key drops. So I think that the battle is probably, that back end battle is between Deontay Hardy, Russell Gage, and Anthony Miller. I would say one of them is definitely making the team, and then maybe 2 if the Ravens decide to carry more wide receivers. Right now I'm leaning Hardy just because I think he can do a variety of things, but it kind of seems like Anthony Miller's making the most plays on offense. I really don't know the answer. I have no idea, but it is interesting to think about that battle. I think that back of that wide receiver room is really heating up, and these next 2 preseason games, as is the rest of training camp, is going to be pivotal for these guys to make an impact. And then I think the Ravens really need to evaluate at that point, and probably are already doing this, but they need to evaluate whether they need to make another move or not, because we've been talking about episode after episode how this receiver room is kind of thin, and another move should be made in my opinion, but we'll see. If one of these guys can step up and really drive some impact. We really didn't think Nelson Aguilar was going to have as much impact as he did last year. I think he was a surprise to some of us when we signed Nelson Aguilar in the offseason, and then we signed Odell. The Odell signing just overshadowed the Nelson Aguilar one by a mile. We acted like Odell was going to have some enormous impact compared to Nelson Aguilar, and I would say it was kind of equivalent. Like, Nelson Aguilar had a pretty solid impact on the Ravens last year. I don't think that that's going to change. I think he's going to be heavily involved again. But there's a lot of other new faces in the back of that wide receiver room, and they have recently been signing these guys. So they're obviously trying to make some moves. They're trying to see if anyone's going to kind of stand out and who's going to, bring the most value to the team. This offseason might be the least dramatic roster battles we've seen. Usually there's a couple more holes on the team where you're really watching that battle play out because you don't know who the starter's going to be. But I would say most of the Ravens roster is pretty filled out. You got the right guard and, like I said, the back end of the wide receivers. I really can't even think. Maybe like deep safety depth, like whether Sanusi Kane's going to make it or not. There's just really not that many debates of who's going to make the roster. But I'll be watching the few roster battles that are going on pretty closely. We got another preseason game this Saturday, another one the Saturday after that. Then they have a week off, and then the regular season's here, man. Thursday night versus Kansas City. Let's go. And then we get to truly see what the 2024-2025 Ravens look like. But that's it for today, guys. I appreciate you tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. As always, have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim there where the sense can't